Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrient Ag Solutions, and I want to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We start first with a discussion about the long-range weather today, and a lot of this today is going to build on what's going on with La Nina. So right in through here, where these cooler colors are, that represents the nose of what's left of our La Nina. We've seen some fading of the ocean temperatures back toward neutral, even warmer conditions over by South America, but we still have the telltale signs of a La Nina, the cold water in the southern hemisphere, the cold water extending up toward the Baja and even into the Gulf of Alaska. But there's quite a bit of warm water right in through this area coming out of this region in the Pacific and also in the North Atlantic as well. And all of these features are going to be a critical component to the upcoming, spring and summer forecast, which we're going to continue to watch and build out our ideas for. But today I want to start with this La Nina. One of the ways by which we measure the strength of the La Nina is looking at something called the Southern Oscillation Index. It's kind of a measure of the pressure differences between Tahiti and Darwin. And what it tells us is how strong those trade winds are moving across the Pacific Ocean. Now, we've got great historical records of this. And just remember something. When the Southern Oscillation Index, or SOI, when those values increase, especially when they get above about +7 on this chart, we're talking about La Nina conditions. When they drop off, we're talking about El Nino. So, for example, I highlighted at the end there the building of the La Nina through 2020 into the beginning of 2021. This right here, really beginning in 2014, but really cranking in 15 and 16, that was our most recent big El Nino event. We also had the big La Nina that happened in 2010 into 2011, which you see here. But take a look right in this area here. 2007 into 2008. Very similar to what we've got going on right now. Unfortunately, as I go looking for analog years to the one we've got now, the 2007-2008, even though the Southern Oscillation Index looked similar, it was quite different in other features in the flow of the atmosphere. You see, what I'm attempting to do here is to look to the past to find some guidance for the future. And what I have to know is the Southern Oscillation Index reached a peak back here around January 10th, and it has been dropping ever since, which means we have a fading La Nina. So looking historically, I need to find time periods when the La Nina was fading. And it's still La Nina. Notice this. We're still up here with values of 13 or 14, and we need to be above +7 to be considered a La Nina. So this is going to continue to fade with time. So using that as a benchmark, what happened in March when we had positive Southern Oscillation Index? Well, it tended to be warm south or inside of this circle that I'm drawing here, with the coldest area in the northwest and then cold shots of air that came out of the Canadian prairie that hit through the Great Lakes states. But generally across the southern tier of the U.S. through the mid-Atlantic, we saw near average to warmer than average conditions. Now, with the La Nina fading, we're building momentum back into the flow of the atmosphere, and that's going to be important for our upcoming precipitation and temperature patterns. But you can see right here the change that's happened since this La Nina started its phase. Those warmer colors, they represent a buildup in the westward momentum of the atmosphere. And at the same time, the trade winds, which are always seen on these diagrams as the blue colors, they're coming out of the east there, they've been less dominant and they've been weaker. Now, why do I bring this up, okay? I bring it up because I think it's going to allow other features in the flow of the atmosphere, like the MJO, for example, to start to move and take on a more dominant role moving forward. So the MJO has been over here on what we call the maritime continent side. That's phase 3, 4, and 5 for much of this winter. Well, it's popped out now into phase 6. It's going over to phase 7, and it might start to move kind of in its normal eastward progression with time here. And what that would signal to me is that if it's going to start to allow other factors to really control the pattern moving forward, we better start learning how to identify those. Now, a year ago in March, we had quite a bit of cold water off the Baja that extended into the Gulf of Alaska, but no signal about a La Nina at this point back in March. And with INSO-neutral conditions last year, we saw, an early start to spring. Notice here when you look at the temperature anomalies from last March, it was warm from Texas all the way through the mid-Atlantic. The colder air was in the Canadian prairie. We saw a lot of strong onshore flow into California, which is what helped work away on the drought that they had developed, at least giving them what they called a miracle March at the end there. But overall, my question is, should we be expecting a bit of a repeat of March 2020 in that there could be some warmer conditions here from Texas all the way to Virginia, possibly? Now, let's get to an answer to that. March, April, and May. We once again see some cooler water here. We do see the fading La Nina, but here's the warmth in the North Pacific and the warmth in the North Atlantic. How are the models responding to this? Well, they're giving us this outlook for March 2021. This is the latest data, came out on Friday. It's looking only at the month of March in terms of temperature anomalies or differences from normal. And there's a pretty wide swath here across the U.S. and the eastern, really 2/3 of Canada, that are favoring above normal conditions in terms of temperatures. Now, that's not right now. We got brutally cold air that's on the way right now, but this is what we're seeing. Now, from there, what is the subtropical ridge going to do? Are we going to be seeing a lot of ridging over like Cuba that could direct the storm track a little bit farther to the north, maybe through the Great Lakes states or through the Ohio River Valley, and give us a drier kind of flavor for March? There's the potential for that. We need to watch that carefully. But notice it is drier back here in the southern and high plains, and we're bringing in quite a bit more precipitation to the Pacific Northwest. But what about the Southwest? And the reason why I bring those questions up is because of our latest drought monitor. While we across North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia are drought-free, we still have over 60% of the country in some form of drought. And we have to watch to see if this expands or moves as we go into March, April, and into May. Now, getting into the near-term weather, now that we've got at least some perspective about March, this is the beginning of the very cold air that's coming out of the Canadian Prairie. Those are wind chill warnings. And wind chill warnings for the northern plains of the U.S. or the upper Midwest mean that we have wind chills here that are down in that minus 40-degree range. So start off the week. We don't have much hazardous outlook for the state of North Carolina, but that will be changing, and I'm going to talk about it. We did see some snow, right, over the weekend, and this is the snowfall map just to kind of give you some perspective here. Just notice that getting back over toward the Appalachian Mountains and then up into parts, of Virginia, there was a few places here that picked up 1 to 3 inches of snow with some locally higher amounts, but this again was really due to elevation here as we got to the Appalachian Mountains. In terms of rainfall, though, the last 3 days, we did bring quite a bit more, better than 3/4 of an inch into a broad sector here of North Carolina. And that's an area I want to watch carefully because since the start of 2021, you can see the west to east gradient here across North Carolina in terms of precipitation. We've been drier to the west and wetter as you get over toward the coast. In fact, places along the east coast here in North Carolina are having a top 30 wettest start to the year. And I got data here that goes back 129 years. Okay, what are we expecting here? Well, as the cold air comes racing out of Canada, we're going to see almost like an active storm track where there's this nearly stationary boundary that's going to sit here on which we're going to continue to get precipitation events to occur. And when you look at this map, let's also compare it to normal because much of this week we're going to have about a 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches above normal precipitation, wettest conditions getting right back here over toward our border with Tennessee. That's what we're expecting this week. Let me show you how it's all going to play out. Today on Monday, we've got some cold air in place. High pressure is kind of dominating. And we won't see, I'm sorry, that went kind of fast there. We won't see precipitation moving into North Carolina till probably Tuesday morning through afternoon. Some lightly scattered showers there, all right? Beyond that point, what's going to happen is I'm going to watch a narrow corridor right here from Oklahoma through the Ohio River Valley, butting into the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia and West Virginia for the chance for some ice. Now, when does that become a problem for North Carolina? Well, here's Wednesday night, getting into Thursday morning. At that point, we could see some widely scattered rain across the state, but we start to see what we call that cold air damming event setting up right here along the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. And there's a lot of precip loaded up behind this that's going to be coming toward us in the lower Mississippi River Valley. So this is Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and evening. And you see that much of that ice stays north into Virginia, and we get more snow as we move up toward West Virginia, Northern Virginia, Maryland, that area. This again is Thursday night. Getting into the early morning hours on Friday, I want to bring this to your attention. We can possibly see maybe a chance here at getting some ice that clips into the northern part of the state. Now, it was last week, I was watching very carefully for a big coastal low to develop at this time on the nose of the coldest air coming out of the Canadian prairie through the central plains of the United States. But the wave, the jet stream wave that was going to give us that dove into Mexico and we lost it. So if we now work our way toward the end of the week, this is Friday morning, Friday afternoon, and evening. We then see that as we go into the weekend, this is Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening. What we're going to be watching for is the cold to finally arrive into North Carolina. And you may see that by the end of next weekend, chances of snow coming in as this big 1050 high settles over the state of basically Iowa there. And that's going to come through, make it for a very cold start to next week before things really crank up midweek next week in the midsection of the country. So with that as kind of our backdrop, let's take a look at a few of the pieces here. Through Sunday evening, the pink on this map shows us where I'm expecting to see some freezing rain. So you see that corridor we mentioned here. Let's take a closer look here, though, in North Carolina, Virginia, that area. So it's going to be mainly focused in Virginia here and then back over to the Appalachian Mountains. But this is where we're seeing our best chances of getting some freezing rain through this weekend. Snow, broader scale view first. So you can kind of see the heavy snow corridor really taking aim on parts of the mid-Atlantic. But zooming in here, does this get far enough south that through the weekend we've got snow? No, it's going to have to get that colder air in place on the backside of this. That could increase our chances for snowfall. Now, we've seen quite a bit in North Carolina for comparison's sake so far this year. But it looks as though the heavy snow is going to stay north and possibly target the D.C. area as we see these next few systems roll through. So the ice and snow threat is farther to the north in Virginia throughout this week. But just to make a complete story here, through the next 10 days, I just want you to notice that our chance of picking up some snow here is not zero. Okay, we could get on the backside when that cold air comes through better chances, but chances of getting more than that, well, this is 6 inches, targets more of the mid-Atlantic. All right. From here, what does the pattern look like mid-month? Well, this is the 10-day forecast, which takes us out to the 18th. We have really linked up the polar vortex in the stratosphere with the polar vortex in the troposphere, and the nose of that cold air is coming down in this trough. By that same token, look at what the jet stream is going to do. It splits around the west, but it comes right back together and targets North Carolina. So that means if we're underneath the jet stream, we have the temperature contrast, and therefore we have the lifting to give us precipitation. And out into week 2, we continue to see wetter than average conditions here across the eastern part of the United States. What's missing from this flow is any bit of a subtropical component that could hit California. Let's keep watching that drought in the west, all right? Temperatures. Now, I recorded this about 7:40 a.m. Central Time today. Got a little bit of a late start here. It was so very cold around here this morning. And what you've got where I live, 6-degree weather, and back here in the northern plains, temperatures this morning were in the minus 20 to minus 25 range. And out of Duluth, they decided to set a pair of pants outside, soaking wet, and they froze right where they stood there. So that's how cold it is in the northern plains. When's that cold air get to us? Well, Monday, we're chilly compared to normal. But you know where the really cold air is right now locked up. Going from Monday into Tuesday, we're still warm here. Temperatures in the 50s. Wednesday, we start to see high 40s. But then as we get toward the end of the week, see the cold air in the mid part of the country. There's Thursday. By Friday, that's our last mild day, okay? Because going into the weekend, here comes Saturday. And then the cold is really set up for Valentine's Day on Sunday. And it looks as though it's going to push toward the east into early parts of next week as well. The day 5 through 10 shows us the coldest anchor, where it will be sitting, and those westerly and northwesterly winds will bring it across the state of North Carolina. The coldest extent, I believe, will be around the 15th and 16th. And what you're now looking at is not air temperature, but 4-inch soil temperatures. And what I've got here is that by the 15th and 16th, we could get sub-freezing 4-inch soil temperatures down to where I just drew that black line. So some very, very cold air coming all the way into the southern part of the Cotton Belt here in Texas. From there, do the temperatures begin to fade past mid-month? A little bit, but not completely. You see that as you look out here in the day 10 through 15, we still have through the middle part of February, getting into that last week of February, some colder air that's in play. But after that, I do start to see some things changing. The first thing is that the stratospheric polar vortex is going to go from here over the Hudson Bay back up to where it belongs over the Arctic. And we see some recovery here in those winds. That's all that graph says over there on the right. Now, if the polar vortex begins to start to make a recovery and really just stay, here over the Arctic, that's a good signal for some warmer conditions coming in. And we can start to see that as we look out fully into the last week of February, with warmer conditions really starting to show back up again in the southern tier of the U.S. and in the plains, and the coldest air going back toward Canada and Alaska. If that occurs, we're going to build in more sense of ridging here. In fact, I'll show you that in a few moments, which means that the wetter conditions I'm expecting into week 2 may not last into week 3 or the beginning of March either. Looking out there, you see the buildup of heights here? Now, all they mean is that means that the jet stream is building farther to the north and more ridging is taking place. All the cold air is back in this region. So the model's pretty consistent here that into the month of March, we could favor warmer conditions that stretch from Texas at times all the way to the mid-Atlantic. Now, it doesn't mean every day is going to be warm, but there are some signals here for an early start to the season. And we've got adequate soil moisture up to this point. From here, South America, speaking of adequate soil moisture, that's down here in southern Brazil and in Argentina. Where they've missed out on it's been eastern Brazil and northern Brazil, especially parts of Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins. That's here, here, and here, and then getting over farther to the east in Minas Gerais. Now, where we're going with this pattern is that over the next 10 days or so, the wettest conditions are going to be where it's been drought-like in parts of eastern Brazil. We're way behind on the harvest of the crop in Mato Grosso. I'm sure you've seen the reports, but in some cases, we could be as much as 20% behind our normal pace. That's about a 15-day or so lag in getting the first crop out. This is your precipitation pattern over the next week, but what I want to get to and finish this up with is where we're going in terms of temperatures and long-range precip. No major heat stress forecast as we look out here through middle of the month. But look at the precipitation problems we might be seeing. Where they're trying to harvest, very wet. Where we're going to need precipitation going into the end of February, it's starting to show up dry. And possibly into mid-March, staying dry down here. Now, if we're dry in Argentina, this is going to have a major impact on full season corn and soybeans during, grain fill time period. And it's starting just to show up as a more consistent signal where we're much wetter to the north where that safrinha crop is in place. So I'm going to watch Argentina carefully. I wanted to keep you aware of this because I think it might be a story worth monitoring, especially as it could impact the markets moving forward. Okay, lots to talk about today. Just keep an eye on what's going on there in the March forecast. And we'll watch it too in South America and keep you updated, all right? Have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.